brand looking to work with a 3PL to better your e-commerce fulfillment? Well, in this video, we're going to walk through everything you should be thinking about, some common pitfalls, and some common questions you should be asking 3PLs that you might potentially want to work with. We're also going to look into what are some of the strategic things you can do while working with a 3PL to help reduce your costs and increase average order speed. My name's Brennan, and I run and operate a 3PL or e-commerce fulfillment center out of Portland, Oregon. And I've been shipping for my own brands for the last probably 10 years, and we've been running a 3PL for the last 5. We've worked with a ton of candle brands over the years, and there's definitely been a lot of learnings that have come with that. And so I just wanted to share in this video some of the things that we think about coming from the 3PL side, some of the things you should be thinking about as a brand looking to work with a 3PL fulfillment center to help make your life a little bit easier and save you a little bit of money. So first off, let's go ahead and dive into some of the things that make candles complicated in the first place. Well, candles are not always, but a lot of the ones we've dealt with and seen are in some sort of glass enclosure, right? And so this means that your 3PL needs to be able to handle fragile things and have experience doing that. Making sure it's in the right size box with the right size dunnage or padding to make sure it's not going to break is super important. If you're shipping packages and your stuff's breaking, the cost by the time you replace it and deal with the customer service ticket and the cost to ship it again, it's so expensive. And so making sure that you mitigate all that up front is going to end up saving you so much money further down the line. Another thing to think about when it comes to candles is the storage requirements. Not all, but a lot of candles have some sort of melting point, right? And you need to confirm that the warehouse that your product is going to be sitting in is not going to get so hot that it would melt your candle. Now, all candles have different melting points, and so really specific to what your melting point is and with your candles, but it's just something to be aware of. We've never had an issue, and our warehouses are like half temp controlled in terms of we have AC, but it's not like a refrigerated warehouse by any means. We've never had any problems with it, but it's just something to think about if you're in a place like maybe Vegas or Phoenix where it gets 120 degrees in the summer, and put that inside of a warehouse where heat is trapped, it could get super hot. Another super important consideration with running a candle company and how that integrates with a fulfillment center is understanding location. Candles tend to go on the heavier side, so if you're shipping really heavy candles, or you commonly sell these in like 8, 10, 12 packs, your location of 3PL is probably going to want to be a little bit different than it would be if you were just shipping super lightweight stuff. So either you should probably work with a 3PL that is somewhat central, or one that has a dual node situation, so you could have one distribution center on the West Coast and one on the East Coast and route orders accordingly. I say that all with a grain of salt because I don't think that most brands need to be running a dual node situation. I think that a lot of times it's overkill until you get to 5,000, 10,000 units. Even for candles where they're like 3, 5, 7 pounds, you are more than okay running this out of a single location. So for most people that are running brands that aren't sending insane amounts, you are totally fine running out of a single node situation. I just mention it because it's something to have top of mind as you move forward, and making sure that you choose a partner that's going to be able to offer those things when you get there. Another request that we've gotten a bunch actually is customization. So maybe you're sending out influencer gift packages, or you're just trying to do some seeding, but you want the packaging to look really nice. You might want a note in there. For whatever reason, it's one of the most common requests we get with candle companies, probably because it's such kind of a nice touch of a gift. But it's something to definitely talk and ask your 3PL about. Like, is customization something you guys do? Is it something you do often? What does the process look like for that? Because even if you don't want to do it right now, it's very likely further down the road you're going to want to do that, and understanding that process ahead of time is going to be super important. So with all the challenges that we get with candles, there's definitely some key things that you want to look at when talking with potential fulfillment center providers. First off, I would always be asking, and whether you're a candle company or a t-shirt company, I always like to ask, do you have other brands that you work with that are similar to us? You can gain a ton about this from the 3PL. Are they going to be able to handle your products effectively? Is there maybe some better ways to ship things that they've learned throughout the process that you could immediately apply and maybe save you some money? Usually you will find that if you work with a fulfillment center that ships products of similar kinds, they're going to have a bunch of things right off the bat that's like, oh wow, we should do X, Y, and Z. We're going to save money here. And that's just because on our side, like, we deal with so much shipment volume that we get really good at optimizing. Okay, this needs to be in this kind of box. This should go this service level in this scenario, or vice versa. And so I think it's always important to at least be thinking about, does this fulfillment center have other clients that are just like us? Because it's going to help you in the long run when choosing a partner. Another thing I would be thinking about with candles is, what does the storage situation look like? I know that candles can tend to be sort of seasonal. Some businesses are, some businesses just aren't. But understanding what your storage fees look like so that you can forecast correctly your inventory, how much you want to hold in that warehouse, what it's going to cost throughout the year, I think is something important to kind of keep top of mind when you're going into these conversations. And again, this just depends. Like if your product is something where it comes in and it's not there for more than 2 months, you're selling through a lot, not a big deal, wouldn't even worry about it. But if you are working with a fulfillment center where maybe you need to keep 20, 30 pallets there for a good chunk of the year, it's just good to understand, what do the storage conditions look like? Are those going to be suitable for your products? But also, how do those charges work so that you can be predictable with your storage fees? Another thing we should be thinking about is the shipping speed. So some e-com companies like to offer 2-day shipping. Is that something that your fulfillment center could potentially be able to provide to you? Everyone's so used to the Amazon shipping, and at least making it available on their site is always nice. And so are there 2-day options that are going to be a good fit and fit within the price range that you would want to offer to your customers? Another thing to consider is, where are most of your packages going? So we work with a candle company, and most of their packages actually primarily go to Hawaii. And so when we were working on quoting with them and getting them a price that would work, one of the main things we did was we looked at, okay, how can we pack boxes more efficiently to fall within the rates that we need them to be to get to Hawaii? And the way it worked out is, like, we can't ship them bigger than a cubic foot, otherwise they get super expensive, and so their case packs get broken down. But we went through this process as part of the quoting and pricing kind of conversation to figure out, okay, let's look at your order data. A lot of this is going to a certain area. Let's make sure that we're optimizing our process and the packaging for that cost. So those are a lot of things that I would just have top of mind, at least when I'm starting to kind of look and have those conversations, just in the back of your head about, okay, what are some of the specific things? I mean, there's all the standard 3PL stuff that you should understand and be discussing and having those conversations, but just having those specific to candles in the back of your head is something I would be thinking about. And so let's say you get further along and now you're actually talking to some 3PLs. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the main things I would 100% ask is, first off, do you work with other candle companies or similar kind of glass, fragile handling things? And what kind of learnings or takeaways do you have that might apply to us? Another one that I always like to do as part of the kind of quoting or pricing process is, I would send them 30 days of your order data and say, hey, can you take this quote that you've put together and apply it against this? Because I find that every 3PL quotes so differently. They have different ways they charge for orders and storage and postage, and it's really hard to do an apples to apples comparison. And so at the end of the day, I think what matters cost-wise is, what does your monthly bill look like? Because that's something that you can compare 3PL to 3PL. And I also think it's kind of a sign of goodwill if the 3PL is going to take the time and put those reports together. And being on the 3PL side, I can tell you that a lot of us have the tools and have built that because it's something that we want to be able to offer to customers, to say, like, hey, here's actually what this would look like before you sign up, and then it's kind of a black box until you get your first invoice. Another important question to be asking is, like we talked about, because of the seasonality potentially of your business, is asking your 3PL, how do you deal with spikes in order volume? That's literally the 3PL's job, right? Is to be able to go from 10 orders a day to 1,000 orders a day and scale with your brand, and you not have to worry about fulfillment at all. And most 3PLs, not going to be an issue, but I think it's always a good question to ask, just so you can have an understanding too of what does that process look like on their side. And usually you're going to find that they're going to be like, hey, actually, if you have any idea this is happening, maybe give us a little heads up. We're going to staff more to make sure those orders are still going out. At the end of the day, it is the 3PL's job. That is literally what you are paying them for, is to have flexibility in fulfillment and not have to manage it yourself. But it's always helpful to be over communicative and let them know about those sorts of things. How does the 3PL pricing work for a candle brand? Well, it's going to fall into somewhat of a similar structure as really any other direct-to-consumer brand. But typically what it looks like is, you're going to have some sort of order fee or pick and pack fee, which is the actual cost to pick and pack that order. And so that's usually going to be anywhere between $1 and $2, $3 for the pick and pack fee. Then you're going to have the cost of the packaging materials, so think the box, the label, any other kind of padding that might go in there. And sometimes some 3PLs build that into their pick and pack fee. Like I said, this is why the monthly comparison is helpful. And then you're also going to have the postage fee. So that's whatever the 3PL is paying to FedEx or UPS or whatever carrier it is. So that's going to be in there. And then you're also at the end of the month going to have a storage fee, which is for all the storage that you've taken up, which typically is bins like the ones you see behind me. So one SKU goes in one bin, and then there are pallet locations for overstock. And so that typically is, add all those together at the end of the month, and that's kind of how you get your total, which is why I think that that period of giving them 30 days and letting them run an analysis and give you a total cost is so helpful, because it gets really confusing really quickly. Multiply that by trying to quote against like 3 to 4 different 3PLs, and you are in a world of hurt in those spreadsheets. So some things I would make sure to avoid when talking to 3PLs. If they come back and they don't really have anyone that's dealt with glass, or at least some procedures around it, I would say if that's something you're shipping, there's probably a better option out there. As a 3PL, I can tell you that we specialize in a lot of different things, but if someone comes to us with something that like we really don't do, it's in our best interest to refer them to another partner that might do a better job, because at the end of the day, we have process and our operations rely on the fact that we have consistency in our process. And if you fall outside the line of that, most 3PLs are going to be like, hey, we might not be a great fit, but maybe so-and-so is going to be. And so I think just understanding that they do deal with fragile, they deal with, if it's candles, even better, right? But if I'm a candle brand and I'm talking to a 3PL who might ship a bunch of glass plates, I'm probably going to feel pretty comfortable with that. And so it just depends scenario to scenario. Another red flag I would be looking for is during the process of pricing, what does the communication look like? Usually it's a pretty good indicator of what it will look like when you are actually a client. Is, are they replying quickly? Are they someone you can get a hold of and talk to on the phone? I think that these things are usually pretty indicative of what your overall experience with a 3PL is going to look like. And so it's important to, even though it might not be a direct number on a piece of paper, what does the communication feel like? Do you feel like you are being taken care of and they care about your business? Or do you feel like they're just sending you these generic spreadsheets and it's probably going to translate into what that fulfillment service may actually end up being like? So that was a lot of the considerations and just some common red flags I would look out for. And also, what does the process of the pricing and all of that look like when talking to these 3PLs? There are a ton of great fulfillment centers out there. There is no shortage of them. And so it's just a matter of making sure you find one that you want to partner with. And some other final thoughts I would say, just in things that I think are good practice, are ask if they have references that you can talk to. Again, if it's a brand that's similar to yours, great. Maybe it's just another customer of theirs, but I think it's always helpful to ask for those references. Another one that isn't as direct, but more of an indirect kind of consequence of working with a 3PL is normally you're going to get access to some sort of software, right? So it's going to track your inventory and your orders and all of that. And I think it's important, before anyone decides what 3PL you want to work with, understand what their software looks like, because there are definitely some that provide more information and make your life easier than others, to the point where I've seen brands sign with 3PL strictly for the software that they are using because they are used to it or they know and love that software. For example, I know a lot of the WMS or warehouse management software, which is what your 3PL is using, provides pretty in-depth like inventory forecasting, maybe product bundling, all these sorts of things that actually cut out a lot of other apps, especially if you're on Shopify, that handle a lot of the inventory across bundles, like these pretty complex use cases, to the point where it actually becomes part of the reason you might sign with a 3PL on top of the service and everything. But like, what does their technology look like that you are going to get access to? And the best part about it is typically those 3PLs are paying a ton of money for software that you get access to as a client for free most of the time. So I think that about wraps it up. Some other just common things that I have learned over the years with candles is, first off, if you're shipping a ton of singles, there are usually some pretty cool custom boxes you can get made that end up saving long-term in terms of putting padding in there and whatnot. Another super helpful thing is, like I kind of talked about, is making sure that the actual dimensions of the box you work with your 3PL to optimize, or even if you're shipping yourself, do some testing around how many should be packed in what size cases, because a lot of the time you're going to find some sort of sweet spot that the postage ends up being cheaper than it probably would have if you just packed it in a case of 50 or whatever, just due to the way that the dim factors work. So with all that said, if you are a candle brand and looking for a fulfillment center, it is something we do. We have our main facility in Portland, Oregon, and a secondary one in Washington, D.C., which we run dual node off of sometimes. And so if that is something you're interested in, feel free to check our website out, send over your info, and we'll be totally able to get a quote. You can get on the phone with me. And yeah, appreciate you guys watching. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop a comment. Also give us a like, helps us out. And yeah, happy shipping.